What is a Christian? That's the question I want to look at for a moment, because if you were to go on the internet and look at all the popular sites out there, all the big churches, if you were to ask anyone on the street what a Christian is, it's someone that believes in Jesus. And normally it's someone most people are scared of, even other Christians. The Christian churches I've been around, everyone's dishonest. Everyone puts a show on the outside. They don't ever cuss around each other or smoke a cigarette or do any of their things that they rush home to do. Have a drink, cuss, feel anxiety, cheat on their taxes, all the things everyone does. But as a Christian in front of other Christians, they put on a show. And this is what most of Christianity is. When you listen to these things on the internet, boy, you just think that's all Jesus wants. And you got to come to Jesus and you got to accept Jesus. And man, oh man, the Christians make Christianity out to be such a shallow thing. And I don't find that it's very scriptural. They rarely use scripture except to grab some moralizing and point out that, well, Jesus needs you to stop sinning and realize that he covered you, and because he did, you got to stop sinning and be an example to others. Well, what's the truth in that? There is some truth in that. And we teach about all these things in our Bible study, and they're listed down below here on the Philadelphian Church YouTube site and also at our brosal.org website and YouTube site by that name. So you can study with us in depth. These are just to give you some insight to sort of beg the question, see if we can't get you to think a little bit about the traditional understanding and where it might be misunderstood. So I've just made some quick notes here about what it seems to me from Scripture. What a Christian is, number one, is someone who believes that Jesus was the Messiah to the Jews. That was the whole premise in the beginning. Even the Apostle Paul, he was out persecuting these people who were claiming that. His whole experience, as he claims it, is he was knocked off his horse, and the Lord came to him in a vision and said, Paul, why are you persecuting me? Who are you? I'm the one you're persecuting. Paul went out, spent the rest of his career getting beat up and thrown out of every synagogue for saying, hey, you guys killed the Messiah. This guy really was the Messiah. Because, of course, the secular Jewish movement didn't recognize Jesus because they were looking for a King David. They were looking for a military leader, someone who couldn't be beat in battle and would put down all their oppressors, who at that time was Rome. So they needed someone strong enough to put Rome down and build them back up and put them as ruler of the nations, as it says, God will eventually accomplish with them. And since that has never happened, they're still waiting for it. And they were waiting for it in Jesus' time. And when this dirty carpenter from Nazareth came along, not even John the Baptist recognized him until he saw the dove come down on him, and he said, whoops, that's him. There's your Messiah. I was told the one you see the Spirit of God come down onto, he's the one. So you couldn't tell by looking at him. And so the Jews didn't believe him. And the whole movement in the beginning was these Jews, these disciples, that were going around telling them, hey, this guy is the Messiah. And they were arguing from the Scriptures, the Psalms, from Isaiah, from Samuel, from Genesis. They were trying to point out that the Messiah did in fact have to look like Jesus when he came. And they never have accepted that. So first thing, a Christian is someone who understands that and recognizes Jesus is that Messiah prophesied through the Old Testament. He represents that to the Jews. Two, they believe in a crazy thing called bodily resurrection. And this is where I think a lot of Christianity gets derailed even today, and always did. If you look at Paul's arguments, he says what we teach is a stumbling block to Jews and foolishness to Gentiles. And the Gentiles he's talking about are the people that descend from Plato and Aristotle and Socrates, the smartest people in the world, the best thinkers that ever lived in those hundreds of years following all of that emergence of the whole system of philosophy, metaphysics, biology, and the sciences that Aristotle laid down. These were the people that spent their whole lives thinking about these subjects. And Paul's going out to try and tell them that the unseen God became seen in a man to represent that very thing of which man can become by dying and resurrecting and being now their unseen soul still clothed in their physical representation. Okay? The Jews couldn't believe it, couldn't believe Jesus was their Messiah, and the Greeks could not accept that sort of metaphysic, and so it was a lunacy. And Paul knew it, and he said that's why it's God that does the calling. God calls out these people to be part of this, because how else could they be part of it? No one could believe this. So secondly, Christians are those crazy people that believe the body will be resurrected at some point and given back to the soul, and that will be a unity in some perfection of a divine nature. 3, Paul makes it clear that those that he calls and enables and justifies and sanctifies, if we suffer as he suffered. There's certainly this connection to carrying that cross he carried, identifying with him, which is nothing more than, of course, selflessness, abandoning our ego and desire to be in the world and to be attached to the world and the comforts that the world offers, the explanations that the world offers that allow us to be selfish, to abandon that to follow him in a way of service to others, essentially, rather than to self. Okay? 4th thing, the only law, he said, love your neighbor as yourself, brotherly love. That's why we call this little endeavor of ours the Philadelphian Church, because that's what that means, the Church of Brotherly Love. And that's the only command. I don't care if you're an atheist. If you love your neighbor as yourself, you're actually living the law of Jesus, whether you know it or not. And I think you're a lot closer to him than many Christians who the Scripture says will say, Lord, Lord, didn't we feed the poor? And didn't we do all these wonderful things in your name? And he'll say, get away from me. I never knew you. So how do we answer for that except to say that there's only one law, love your neighbor. Really love your neighbor as yourself. An impossibility, as we've taught before, but that's the goal, just like Buddha's negative version of that, which is completely abdicate from any desires of the flesh at all and become a no self. Jesus says, no, use that self and all those desires, but put them into the service of someone besides yourself. That's even harder. And then 5, faith is clearly seen as the action in someone's life. Jesus' half-brother James writes his very powerful explanation that what good does it do if someone comes to us hungry and we say, oh, go in God's name, bless you and keep you, and we don't do anything to feed them. So what we believe in, at any rate, whether we believe in ourselves, whether we believe in God, whether we follow Jesus, whether we follow the stars, whatever we really believe is seen in what we do with our life and our action. And so, to summarize, a real Christian, there is no such thing, there's only a Christian following Christ or not, or people that perhaps would like to or try to. But a Christian believes Jesus is the Messiah, believes in a bodily resurrection, suffers in the same way Jesus suffered, which means to be rejected of the world because you don't identify with the world. You identify with a world that the world can't clearly see. To love your neighbor as yourself, which is a complete abdication of the ego in a positive frame of reference, and that all of these things would just be apparent in your life. It'd make you a pariah of some sort or a spectacle of some sort, because you would be the person people could point to and say, wow, no, that's a really different person. They follow Jesus. So anyway, not many Christians from my standpoint, but it's what a Christian really is. I hope that helps you, and if you want to learn more, down below are our Bible teachings and our other insights, and we invite you to check those out.